he said something very interesting. He said, miracles are rare. And when I tell you, when I heard that, I almost fell out of my seat. So a few months ago, I was in Europe. I was traveling to Europe and I went to a small town. And lovely town, lovely people. I love it whenever I go there. And I went to this small town and I just happened to be in that city for a Sunday service. I went to church on a Sunday morning and it was awesome. The church was lovely. The people were lovely. Worship was awesome. The pianist was amazing. It was just such a fun time. And so when I went, they had guest speakers rather, that day. And it was a lovely couple, sweet couple. And it was very interesting to me. They're sharing their testimony. And I say this, let's give a disclaimer. I don't say this to make it seem as if these people did not have knowledge, did not have wisdom. Not at all. I'm just going to use their testimony and explain what it did to my heart. So in the testimony, the husband was speaking. And the husband had a history. I can't remember exactly what the illness was, but he had a history of a particular illness that caused him to have be paralyzed. And he was actually speaking and teaching on the concept of contentment. So I understood why he said the things that he said. But in his preaching, in his teaching, he said something very interesting. He said, miracles are rare. And when I tell you, when I heard that, I almost fell out of my seat. I almost literally, my heart was beating fast. It was just so strange to me because I've been in church my whole life. For those that don't know, I grew up in church. I've always been in church. I wasn't always serving the Lord how I'm serving the Lord now. I wasn't always in God in that sense, how I am now. But I've never in my history of church, and I grew up in a Nigerian church, I've never in the history of church heard anybody on the pulpit say miracles were rare. Whenever I was growing up in church, miracles were always associated with God, even with the unbelievers. You know, they would even, mock Christians in a way and make it seem like you believe everything, you believe anything is possible because you believe in God. It was a thing that I grew up learning and knowing. So when I heard this, it was my first time ever hearing somebody on the pulpit say miracles are rare. And I'm going to say this again. I'm not knocking anybody's understanding. I'm not knocking, the concept of what he was trying to convey at all. But it was rare to me. And I think the reason why I almost fell out of my chair wasn't just because it was a shock factor to it. I think what made me want to fall out of my chair rather, was because it spoke to the hopelessness of his time. When I think about all the things that's happening in the world, I think about all the things that's happening in nations. And one thing I would say is that as much as God is doing a new thing, we have a lot of people growing in hopelessness. Because the fact that that man can say miracles are around the pulpit and nobody clinched their pearls, nobody felt like this is crazy, nobody said, okay, this is not truth, is because we have become common with being faithless. We have made ourselves okay with not believing God anymore. And there's this whole debate even happening in the church. I won't mention men and women of God's names, but happening in the church. If we should even continue to preach miracles how we've preached miracles before. And it's something that I would say there's an agenda behind it. Though it's something that we should always come into the truth of, there's an agenda behind it. And so I don't want to speak on that because that's another issue for another day. But when it comes to the aspect of somebody saying miracles are rare, and I mentioned nobody was moved by that. Nobody felt that was off. In fact, even when I was talking to members outside the church service and we were talking about it, they didn't even remember the man saying that. And I felt like I mentioned before, it speaks to the heart of the time. And like I mentioned, the man was dealing with illness for some time. And whenever I think about that, it brings a scripture to my mind that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And the issue with that, the dangerous aspect about that is that we've all gone through situations that we were believing God for something. We felt like it was coming in a different way, or we felt like God wasn't listening, or we felt like God wasn't answering that, even though we know that's not true. But the Bible lets us know that when we have a hope for something and it doesn't come to pass, has the ability to affect our heart. And when you think about your heart, and you think about your soul, you think about your mind, you think about your emotions, and when your heart becomes sick, the dangers of that, when you understand the plans and the routes of the enemy, that the enemy has the ability to now affect your heart in certain ways where you don't believe God again. And I believe that man that was speaking was in that place. He didn't no longer believe God for a healing. But I think about the woman with the issue of blood. If the woman of the issue of blood, after year 5 or after year 6, made it in her mind that her issue was just going to be her issue. After year 7, it's like, okay, well, it's been 7 years now. This is just going to be my issue. This is just going to be the case. Miracles don't always happen for everybody. She would not have got her miracle at year 10, 12. The Bible said that she suffered with an issue for 12 years. But when you think about her eagerness to touch the hem of Jesus, the reason why she could still, after 12 years, rush to touch the hem of Jesus is because her faith was still there. And so you have a people, and the times do not help. The media does not help. All these things that we're seeing does not always help. Is because we have a people now that don't believe God anymore. And it breaks my heart. I'm telling you, when I thought about it, I meditated on it. I'm sure the people, the person that I went to church with was like, okay, it's not that deep. But for me, it was so deep because it's my heart for people. It's my heart for the things of God. It was just alarming to me that we could hear that on the pulpit and not be moved. We can hear that on the pulpit and not question it. And in fact, we can even try to make sense of it, that we can believe that. But like I mentioned, what if the woman with the issue of blood thought the same thing? We would not have her testimony as a hallmark for our faith to say, hey, no matter the issue, God still has the ability to heal. So the issue is not any other thing that people want to make it to be. We have to hold on to what is truth. Yes, there's an aspect we have to learn contentment, for sure. Yes, there's other principles in the word we have to understand, of course. But let the truth be the truth. We cannot now use strong statements and say miracles are rare, because they're not. As long as Jesus is living, as long as he lived yesterday and he's living today and he'll live tomorrow, miracles will always be available. So that was something I just wanted to share. I think we're living in a faithful generation, and I think this is even a point that those that are going through situations, that have been going through situations for times, for seasons, for months, for years, don't let your confession change, because as long as your confession is there, the enemy has nothing to toy with you. I love the scripture that in the word that says, I am convinced. We have to move from the place of just having a knowledge about something to being convinced about a thing. We don't need to just have knowledge about miracles. We need to be convinced about miracles, because as long as we're convinced, the enemy can't play with us. In this season, make it in your mind, because the thing of the matter is, calamity will come, famine will come, but the people that will be in Goshen, the people that will be saved, are the people that are convinced that miracles are happening every single day. I'm a miracle, you're a miracle. Miracles are not rare.